Have you ever heard this noise coming from the front end of your Ford Fusion? Or have you ever experienced this problem where you just can't get the key out of the ignition? And that's obviously a serious problem. So let's talk about it in today's top 5 problems video on this second generation Ford Fusion. Now, like I said, not being able to remove the keys from the ignition is a serious problem because you can't just park your car somewhere and leave the keys with it and walk away. But this problem actually originates from the shifter, unlike what you might think, not from the ignition cylinder, the tumblers inside the key, or anything like that. And what happens is it doesn't know that you have put it in park. Even if it's mechanically in there, the sensor has no idea, so it won't let you remove the key because the car is programmed to not allow you to remove the key while it's in gear for safety purposes. The only way to fix this is actually to replace the shifter knob. However, if you have already planned that repair and the problem is happening, the best way to do this is to just take the shifter out of park again, put it back in park, do it as many times as it takes in order for it to recognize that it is in park so it can let you take the key out nice and smooth. Our second problem is related to the transmission. You might feel some harsh or delayed shifting as you're driving, and with the lower mileage vehicles, if you have one of these, it's going to come down to a software issue actually. So don't panic, don't think it's an internal transmission problem because it is likely not. What you have to do is get that software updated. It can be installed, flashed on the transmission control module. That should fix your issue. However, what I want to mention is if you have high mileage on this and the transmission maybe has not been serviced, well, at that point, if you have had the update done in the past, which if you don't know, by the way, you can call your local dealer, they can tell you because it should be on their record, then you might be looking at some internal transmission problems. Start by fluid change that fluid out, see if it gets better. If not, there will have to be some repair done on the valve body or even internal on the clutches. So hopefully you don't get to that point, but also if you know you have this delayed or harsh shifting issue and the software update has not been performed, do it as quickly as you can because that bad shifting can actually cause mechanical damage inside the transmission if it goes on for too long. Our third problem on this vehicle is going to be front lower control arms. Yes, they wear out on every vehicle eventually. However, on these vehicles, it is more common for these bushings here to wear out, and what you get after that happens is some squeaking and creaking over bumps or as you turn or go over uneven surfaces, basically as this control arm is pivoting up and down. On these, the ball joint that is part of the control arm is not replaceable. Now, what I suggest when you are having this issue is, first of all, inspect the whole front end to make sure it's not other components. You want to verify that. Once you have verified that it is the control arms, instead of just getting bushings and replacing those, get yourself a whole control arm assembly because more than likely this ball joint is, well, not so great anymore, being old, and you can't just replace it. So get yourself a whole control arm assembly, and what I recommend is going to oneauto.com, get yourself a kit for left and the right control arm, do them both in pairs, because you'll need an alignment after this job and you don't want to have to either, one, deal with another control arm later down the line, or two, pay for 2 alignments. Having said that, once you replace these control arms, you should be good to go, problem solved. Our fourth problem will have to do with the EGR on this. It stands for exhaust gas recirculation. What you'll see is a check engine light and a P0400 code that will basically go one of 2 ways here. One, you will get the code, you dive into the problem, and you find nothing wrong physically in the EGR system. That is actually due to a software that needs updating, where the computer thinks there's a problem, but there really isn't an actual problem, so it triggers that check engine light, gives you a code, but you find nothing. The other way that it can go is, of course, there is actually a problem. Whether it needs a software update or not, it detects a problem. So you go in there. A lot of times the EGR passages can get clogged up with carbon and just build up over time, especially since these are turbocharged engines. If oil sneaks by that turbo or gets burnt and gets sucked back in through the EGR, that can cause problems. So regardless, you're going to have to clean stuff, seal it all back up, make sure it's good to go, reset that check engine light code, and that's it. Problem solved. Our fifth and final problem has to do with the variable camshaft timing solenoids, also known as the VCT solenoids, which, if you remove the engine cover, you can see right here, exhaust solenoid on the exhaust side and intake on the intake side. What happens with these is you get a check engine light with a code telling you there's a problem with one or both of these solenoids. If the solenoid is completely unresponsive, it's just dead, you're going to have to replace it because it's electronically operated, and most likely it has completely failed, like I said. To do this job, you have to remove the valve cover, so I also highly recommend a new valve cover gasket to go with this job. Now, the other way these can fail is by getting oil buildup or dirty oil buildup on the outside of them. They have a little filter screen that can get clogged up, and they can't supply proper oil pressure to the camshaft phasers. What I also recommend is replacing both at once, especially if you have oil or dirty oil issues, because if one is clogged, the other one is not too far behind it. You can go to oneauto.com, get yourself a kit for both intake and exhaust, and like I said, a new valve cover gasket to seal everything back up. Once you're done, put everything back together, keep that oil nice and fresh, and you should be good to go. Just a quick tip for you. Keep up with the oil changes on these engines. Turbocharged and direct injection puts a lot of strain on the oil, and it can easily get a lot of buildup in the engine that will cause bad things with the turbochargers, the timing chains, VCT solenoids like we talked about. So you want to keep that oil nice and fresh, and the engine might last for quite a while. And these are fun to drive too.